In this video, we are going to learn about natural selection in action. So, types of natural selection. First topic: over the 150 years after Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace proposed their theories of evolution by natural selection, researchers have studied extensively the response of organisms to selection, reflecting changes in their environments, both in nature and under experimental conditions. Changes in the genotype can track selection on the phenotype, leading to heritable changes in genotype and phenotype. Natural selection acts on all organisms, whether unicellular or multicellular. Natural selection modifies structural, physiological, and/or behavioral features of the phenotype, can act at any stage during the life history of multicellular organisms, and leads to differential survival and reproductive output. Because it results in differential reproduction, selection has the greatest influence when it operates before organisms reproduce. At least 5 types of selection have been discovered. 3 types of natural selection are recognized, like stabilizing, directional, and disruptive, or diversifying selection. A further but different type of selection, sexual selection, has been known since it was recognized by Darwin. More recently and more controversially, selection on groups or populations, group selection and kin selection, has been proposed. First, let's have an introduction about this topic. Selection acts on the fitness difference among different phenotypic traits of individuals within populations. Although selection changes the phenotype, the transmission of phenotypic changes between generations is genetic and epigenetic. After systemic and persistent selection on the phenotype from generation to generation, allele frequencies can change, that is, genotype can change. The genotype need not be only that of the individual under selection. Genes of the parent, maternal gene effects, and mitochondrial DNA transmit changes between generations, and the ability to learn is transmitted both genetically and culturally or environmentally. Genetic variation in populations facilitates the genotypic reasons or response that can follow rounds of selection. Instead, selection can also act on variation itself. Selection can pursue genetic variation if the heterozygous genotype is more fit than either homozygote, as in sickle cell anemia, or when the frequency of an allele affects fitness. Allele frequency may vary in populations of the same species in different environments, as in populations of the British peppered moth, Biston betullaria in England, or of the rock pocket mouse in American Southwest. 2 examples that are discussed elsewhere in this text. Then advantageous genotype are said to occupy adaptive peaks of varying value according to their degree of fitness, using the analogy of a landscape with mountains of different height. Finally, selection does not only act on adult phenotypes. In multicellular organisms, selection can elicit changes in gametes, embryos, and/or larval stages depending on the life history stage at which selection acts. In this way, selection can influence survival, fertility, and mating success. Then, survival of the fittest. Evolution has been described as the survival of the fittest because of the operation of natural selection. The term survival of the fittest, coined by Herbert Spencer, was adapted by Alfred Russel Wallace from the onset out by Charles Darwin only in later editions of The Origin of Species. Darwin, through struggle for reproduction, was a more apt term than survival of the fittest for evolution by natural selection. Darwin's concern over the term survival of the fittest has been returned by many others. The argument is that because it defines those that survive as the fittest and the fittest as those that survive, survival of the fittest is a circular, unprovable statement, and so should be abundant. The term is not tautological, but it is incomplete. Why? Because it does not embrace the requirement for heritable change for evolution to occur, and equates fitness with survival rather than with differential reproduction. Selection changes the range of phenotypes that survive to reproduce in the single generation. Also, the term fails to capture that selection on a phenotypic character can be followed by changes in gene frequency, but it's not the same as change in gene frequency. The relative fitness of a genotype is certainly not the only factor contributing to its survival. For example, if there is a heterozygote advantage, the frequency of harmful recessive allele may remain stable despite selection against homozygotes for that gene. Evolutionary theory certainly includes more than survival of the fittest. R. A. Fisher began his classic 1913 treatise, The Genetical Theory of Natural Selection, with the statement natural selection is not evolution. Natural selection is the umbrella term for a range of evolutionary processes, the outcome of which is differential survival and reproduction. So, what are the evolutionary processes and therefore that modes or types of natural selection are recognized? Types of selection. It is commonly assumed that selection is always for the optimum, preserving the strong and eliminating the weak. As discussed above, selection is measured by survival of the fittest and reproductive success. Three types of natural selection that affect the phenotypes of individuals are recognized, like stabilizing selection maintains phenotypic traits close to mean value. Then directional selection is seen when an extreme phenotype has adaptive value or in the rapid elimination of degenerative mutations. Then disruptive or diversifying selection occurs when particular phenotype are better adjusted to some aspects of the environment than the other phenotypes that have been better adapted to other aspects of the environment. As environmental conditions are often variable, even on short time scales, these different types of selection do not exist alone but combine in different ways. As a consequence of environmental variability or changing biological conditions, such as the arrival of new predator, one type of selection may cease and be followed by or overlap another. Sexual selection, which differs from the three modes of natural selection, occurs when selection operates differentially on males and females and of the same species to influence the likelihood of mating. Then a further, previously controversial but now accepted form of selection, group selection, was proposed for selection on traits that benefit a group, usually a population, at the expense of individuals within the group. Situations in which an individual sacrifices itself for the population, like altruism, are among the clearest example of operation of a particular type of group selection known as kin selection. These six modes of selection are outlined and discussed in the chapter. Then stabilizing selection. When selection has operated on particular characters over many generations, most populations achieve phenotypes that are well, if not optimally adapted to their surroundings. Many features of the phenotype cluster around some value at which fitness is highest. Individuals who depart from these optimum phenotypes are expected to show lower fitness than those closer to the optimal values. A classic study documenting stabilizing selection in the wild came about as the result of a major storm, followed by a very cold 1st of February morning in 1898 in Providence, Rhode Island. Herman Bumpus, in 1862 to 1943, a comparative anatomist at Brown University, found 136 dead or stunned house sparrows, Passer domesticus, on the ground. 72 sparrows survived, but the remaining 64 died. Bumpus had the foresight to weigh the birds, measure their wingspans, and prepare their skeletons to measure the lengths of some of the major bones. Measurements of the sparrows that survived the storm clustered around the mean shown by a picture. Measurements of the same features on the sparrows that failed to survive the storm clustered around the extremes of variation for each feature. And as Bumpus concluded from these data, it is quite as dangerous to be conspicuously above a certain standard of organic excellence as it is to be conspicuously below standard. Bumpus kept all the measurements, which have been reanalyzed at several independent studies, separating males from females and using more powerful statistical analysis than were available in the 1890s. We now realize that stabilizing selection operated primarily upon the females, which were on average smaller than the males and had smaller variation in body size. Stabilizing selection favored the favorable body size of females, intermediate body size of females, maintained body size closer to the norm. Then direction selection. Not all character selection is stabilizing. A second form of selection, directional selection, operated on the male house sparrow discussed above. Males are larger than the females and show less variation in body size. Sensitivity of stabilizing and directional modes of selection is reinforced when the size difference between males and females are considered. Males weigh 29.51 plus or minus 0.86 gram. Females 28.49 plus or minus 1.72 gram. Differences that are indistinguishable to our eyes but discriminated by selection. As organisms move in one or of the other direction of phenotypic distribution, selection can result in an extreme phenotype. Animal and plant breeders who select for extremes of yield, productivity, or resistance to disease commonly practice such directional selection. The environment of population is changing, and when one or few phenotypes are adapted to the new conditions. Directional and stabilizing selection have been demonstrated after the separation of one lineage into two during evolution. A classic example is the range of bird species from the Galapagos Islands known as Darwin's finches. Directional and stabilizing selection can operate sequentially, as demonstrated in situations where different genotypes produce a single phenotype. And in the Drosophila population selected for a change in Bristol number followed a mutation in the skewed gene. Directional selection led to alterations in Bristol number. Stabilizing selection then maintained the new Bristol number. Selection affected both variation and the trait and pattern of variability of the trait. Many transcription factors found in humans, chimps, orangutans, and rhesus macaques show similar levels of expression over some 70 my. A pattern is interpreted by Glade et al. As resulting from stabilizing selection. Other transcription factors show similar patterns in non-human primates but altered expression in the human lineage taken as a result of directional selection in human lineage. Then disruptive selection. Selection, whether stabilizing or directional, may act in a constant fashion if the selective environment is uniform. However, when conditions are changing, a population may be subjected to divergent or cyclically challenging or oscillating environments to which different phenotypes among its members are most suited. Such selection, known as disruptive or diversifying favors the functions extremes of distribution of a phenotype, are so established multiple optima for the phenotype within a population, reflecting changing environment or biological conditions. Disruptive selection may be followed by directional selection, which may yield to stabilizing selection, as has been documented for beak size in relation to seed size in Darwin's finches on the Galapagos Island. Consequently, disruptive selection has been shown to lead to sexual dimorphism and/or speciation. Sexual selection. Mate choice is one of the most important influence on animal species behavior. When selection operates preferentially and differentially on males and females, we follow Darwin as referring to such selection as sexual selection. Although both sexes benefited if their offspring survive, male and female animals often differ in their cost of reproduction. Females invest more resources in producing large eggs or ovules than do males in producing small sperm or pollen. Accordingly, female's genes benefit if she discriminates in her choice of mates, female choice, or male gametes, sperm competition, to maximize the chances of success of her relatively expensive production of eggs. For the same reason, there is an advantage for females to seek increased male parental investment in their offspring, a strategy especially notable among bony fish but also seen in mammals and birds, in which reproductive success can depend on a relatively long term commitment of one parent to their progeny. For example, male emperor penguins or Aptenodytes foresteri incubates a single egg for an average of 115 days. Male may be more extravagant in disposing of their relatively inexpensive and more plentiful sperm. Although competition between sperm for access to eggs is an effective means of increasing their reproductive success, genes carried by a male are spread more widely through the population if he fertilizes as many females as possible. This conflict of interest between conflict of interest between the sexes leads to a variety of mating patterns depending on a variety of factors, including the degree of parental care necessary for egg or infant survival and which sex or whether both sexes provide such care. In groups, females are primarily responsible for parental care, including many vertebrate species. Males are likely to compete with each other for success in mating. As a result, selection can occur for traits that increase the competitive abilities of males and or that increase their attraction to females. As Darwin put it, sexual selection depends on the success of certain individuals over others of the same sex in relation to the propagation of the species, while natural selection depends on the success of both sexes at all ages in relation to the general conditions of life. The sexual struggle is of two kinds. In the one, it is between individuals of the same sex, generally the males, in order to drive away or kill their rivals, and females remaining passive, while in the other, the struggle is likewise between the individuals of the same sex in order to excite or charm those of the opposite sex, generally the females, which no longer remain passive but select the more agreeable partners. Much evidence exists for competition between males in those species where one male mates with many females or polygony. In order to gain access to females, males may have special competitive armaments such as horns and antlers and can lead to considerable sexual dimorphism. Longer horns and male tongue beetles are a well-studied example. Males are generally larger than females in such groups. Male elephant seals are 8 times larger than females, and male northern fur seals are on average 7 times heavier than females. Both species have extreme polygamy. And because of female choice, male ornaments can become quite conspicuous, as in the dramatic plumage of peacocks, birds of paradise, and hummingbirds. Such exaggerated traits like the peacock's tail are adaptive and selected for because they signal to others that the individual with the phenotype is in sufficiently good condition to expend the extra energy to produce and maintain the trait, a concept known as the handicap principle. Selection for such features can track environmental change rapidly. In brant swallows, which are monogamous, the outermost tail feathers are 20% longer in males than in females. In response to changing climatic conditions at sites on the spring migration route, Moller reported that lengths of these feathers in males increased by 11 mm, but in females only by 3 mm, indicating that characters present in both sexes can respond differentially to some selective pressures. As concluded by Ronald Fisher in 1930, such situations exist because females continuously mate with individuals whose attractiveness in such populations is passed on to their sons, and because the daughters of these females inherit their mother's preference for such phenotypically exaggerated males. At a behavioral extreme of sexual selection are male Australian red-backed spiders, which place themselves within the reach of females' jaws to be cannibalized by the female while they are mating or have just mated. The suicidal trait has adaptive features allowing such males to copulate longer and fertilize more eggs than their non-cannibalized male competitors. Next, group selection. Selection for the differential reproduction of groups, now known as group selection, was proposed by Darwin for situations in which social adaptations in a group of organisms appear to place individual organisms in the population at a disadvantage. For many decades, evolutionary biologists accepted that group selection was theoretically possible, but debated the extent to which it occurs. Group selection normally counters the effects of selection on individuals. Selection within groups is usually found to be stronger than selection among groups, and group adaptations can and often do arise from selection on individuals. Selection on individuals and group selection can operate in the same direction, as demonstrated in animals that forage cooperatively. This was demonstrated in a classic experimental test of evolution and group selection in laboratory populations of the floor beetle Tribolium castaneum. Within 3 or 4 generations of group selection in which all populations were exposed to the same selection regime, populations differed from one another in size by as much as 200%. Group selections occurred despite the fact that individual selection on controlled populations was reduced population size by as much as 75% over the same time. Mathematical models show that selection within groups necessitates high extinction rates, particularly no gene flow, and large population sizes, frequency dependent. Group selection is receiving increased attention in part because it has been broadened to consider selection at other levels like multi-level selection, including selection between species like species selection, or accidental factors such as catastrophes resulting in survival differences among species sorting. Other mass interactions such as susceptibility or resistance to parasitic infection also can involve group survival or extinction. The two major examples of group selection are altruism and reciprocal altruism, occur in situations in which individuals cooperate only with those who also cooperate with them. The benefits of the altruism lie in the future. Then kin selection has been proposed to explain social behavior in some lineages of ants, bees, and wasps, hymenopteran insects. Now we are going to learn about altruism. Although the importance of group selection has been much debated in a population with sexual reproduction and altruistic social behavior, selection seems to occur for a benefit of the group, even though it may harm an individual's own genetic future. Information provided by an individual affecting the survival of other members of a group is dramatically revealed when a monkey encounters a leopard and reacts with a loud scream, signaling other monkeys in the group to take refuge. Although this warning or signal or alarm call gives us the impression that it would call the predator's attention to the screamer and diminish its chance for survival, alarm signals are usually given by an individual in a safe location or at a distance from the group. Regardless, the signal helps preserve other members of the group to which it is related. Such altruistic relationships, which are discussed further, remains us that fitness can be affected by behavior in various ways. Courtship display and mating behaviors, feeding and care of offspring by individuals other than the parents, as occurs in birds. Altruism, behavioral mimicry, schooling or swarming, and aggression are some examples. Genetic and social favors or factors interact to influence fitness in many organisms, especially mammals, as elegantly demonstrated in the recent study of female calving success in wild bottlenose dolphins. Next topic, kin selection. In populations with sexual reproduction and altruistic social behavior, a form of group selection known as kin selection has been proposed to occur for the benefit of the group. Such a form of selection would operate on a population level. Kin selection has been proposed to occur in species that display altruistic behavior. Advantages of kin selection are seen in the alarm calls of velvet monkeys. Advantages of kin selection are seen in the alarm calls of velvet monkeys that provide the individual with indirect benefits by helping its genetic relatives. A similar type of selection has been proposed to occur in distasteful prey species in which individuals with warning or aposematic colors make poisonous or distasteful animal conspicuous and recognizable to a predator. In some species, all individuals are aposematic, such as yellow and black striped wasps, or brightly colored poisonous for frogs and snakes. The warning pattern makes them more susceptible to predation, but through their death, they protect related genotypes that carry the same pattern, and patterns are recognized as toxic by potential or experienced predators. The life history strategy in which one fertilized female lives cooperatively with many non-breeding individuals and one or more breeding males is known as eusociality. In 1964, British evolutionary biologist William Hamilton in 1963 to 2000 provided mathematical formulae by which some of the benefits of such cooperative social behavior could be evaluated. It is to the genetic advantage of females to invest their energy in raising sisters rather than producing daughters who are more distantly related. In evolutionary terms, this means that the altruistic behavior of sterile female workers helping raise more sterile workers' progeny for their mother, the queen, would be expected to arise repeatedly in Hymenoptera. Independent evolution of altruism at least once in ants, 8 times in bees, and twice in wasps bears this out. The Hymenopteran system of sex determination and altruism, coupled with parental care, led John Maynard Smith in 1920 to 2004 to coin the term kin selection. As Maynard Smith pointed out, the main reason for thinking that kin selection has been an important mechanism in the evolution of cooperation is that most animal societies are in fact composed of relatives. All ants, bees, and wasps have haploid males and diploid females, a situation known as haplodiploidy. Relatedness is greatest in species in which females mate with a single male, and lower in honeybees and ants in which females mate with multiple males. In evolutionary terms, this means that the altruistic behavior of sterile female workers helping raise more sterile worker progeny for their mother would be expected to arise repeatedly in Hymenoptera. And we learned about haplodiploidy. Relatedness is greatest in species in which a female mate with a single male, and lower in honeybees and ants in which females mate with multiple males. Males develop from unfertilized haploid eggs and females from fertilized diploid eggs. All the females are sisters from a single pair of parents are more closely related than the mothers to their own daughters. The diploid female offspring of a queen sharing more genes with their sisters, 75%, than with their daughters, 50%. Genotypes of the sisters as a group, or kin, benefit from female workers who, instead of reproducing, rely on their mother's reproductive ability by helping her raise children or sisters rather than producing their own daughters. This Hymenopteran system of sex determination has been shown to be especially prone to the evolution of eusociality, the benefits of which include communal nesting, joint protection against predators and parasites, and sharing foraging for food. Genetic relationship leads to a conflict of interest for a colony sex ratio being more related to sisters. It is to the workers' genetic benefit that the colony supports more females and favor distantly related males. Queens, by contrast, being related equally to sons and daughters, benefit genetically when males and females are produced in the equal numbers. When a queen mates more than once, genetic relationship between female workers decline, but a worker is still more closely related to her mother's female offspring than to her sister's female offspring. Workers which only produce male offspring destroy eggs laid by other workers but not laid by queen. And altruism is social interactions can produce results that are positive or negative for individuals involved in the interactions. Consequences can range from a mutual benefit to a positive advantage to the performer but not to the recipient, or negative effects of altruistic sacrifice to the performer but advantages to the other individual. Fitness effects of altruism on the altruist may be negative compared to selfishness, but are positive for others in the population. On the genetic level, altruism benefits any genes the altruist shares with relatives, even if the altruist is killed and so is unable to pass along its own genes. Thus, individuals in a socially interacting group contain many altruists are better off achieve higher fitness. The effects of others is more positive than in a group with fewer altruists. So the success of a group depends on a group property, the frequency of individuals expressing certain behaviors rather than on characters confined to only single individuals. It must not be forgotten that although a high standard of mortality gives but a slight or no advantage to each individual man and his children over the other men of the same tribe, yet that an increase in the number of well-endowed men and the advancement in the standard of mortality will certainly give an immense advantage to one tribe over another. Since the early 1930s, population geneticists have proposed that there are genetic advantages in altruistic behavior in which individuals endanger their own survival for those who carry closely related genotypes. In the floor beetle, Tribolium confusum, egg-eating cannibalism by larvae declines the groups in which larvae only feed on genetically related eggs. This altruistic behavior of refraining from cannibalism is selected because it enhances the survival and reproduction of related individuals and would be considered prey in the absence of altruism. Then reciprocal altruism. The situation in which individuals cooperate only with those who also cooperate with them is known as reciprocal altruism, a concept introduced by Robert Trivers. Trivers hypothesized that altruism can become established in a group where the frequency of interaction among individuals is high and their lifespan sufficiently long to enable recipients of altruistic acts to return favors to the altruists. Although altruism can be dangerous for the altruist, it may have significant benefits to the altruist when it is reciprocated. Thus, the benefits to individuals who pre-take in reciprocal altruism can far overweight the costs. Cooperative defense roles taken on by members of the group, whether lions, primates, cattle, birds, and so forth, involve shared genetic survival. Fish aggregate in schools, the schools offering increased defense against predators when compared to isolated individuals. Group and individual selection reinforce one another in such situations. Earlier, we have mentioned about the handicap principle. So, handicap principle is a comprehensive theory of animal display and signaling based on the proposition that the effectiveness of a signal depends on the cost or handicap borne by the individual generating the signal. So, the concept of the handicap principle is a theory of evolutionary biology proposed by Amos Zahavi in the 1970s. It suggests that certain extravagant or costly traits observed in animals can serve as reliable signals for an individual's genetic fitness or overall equality or quality. According to the handicap principle, the presence of a costly trait or behavior indicates that the individual possessing it is in a good overall health and has sufficient genetic quality to withstand the costs associated with that trait. This principle is based on the idea that only individuals with superior genetic traits can afford to invest resources in extravagant features or behaviors without compromising their survival or reproductive success. The classic example often used to explain the handicap principle is the extravagant plumage of male peacocks. The elaborate, colorful tail feathers of male peacocks are a handicap because they are energetically expensive to produce and maintain, and they also make the bird more visible and vulnerable to predators. However, despite these disadvantages, the impressive tail feathers act as a signal to females that the male peacock possesses superior genetic fitness and is therefore a desirable mate. The handicap principle suggests that the presence of a costly or extravagant trait in an animal can serve as an honest signal for genetic quality, and only individuals with high quality genes can afford to bear the costs associated with such traits. This theory has been used to explain the theory of exaggerated traits in animals, including elaborate courtship displays, antlers in male deer, and bright coloration in fish. It is worth noting that while the handicap principle provides a useful framework for understanding certain traits in the animal kingdom, it does not apply universally to all traits or species. More examples like lion's mane. Male lions possess a majestic and voluminous mane, which is an example of costly trait. Large mane makes them more conspicuous and also increases their vulnerability in fights with other males. However, a full and dark mane is seen as an indicator of a male lion's strength and overall fitness, making it an attractive feature for females during mate selection. Then bird songs. In many bird species, males exhibit complex and elaborate songs during breeding season. Singing requires energy and exposes the mate to predators, making it a costly behavior. The quality and complexity of this song can serve as an honest signal of the male's genetic fitness and overall health, indicating its potential for reproduction and that he is capable of surviving and thriving despite these costs. Then stag beetles antlers. Male stag beetles possess enlarged and elaborate antlers which are used in combat with rival males during mating season. These antlers are energetically expensive to develop and maintain and also hinder the beetle's mobility, making it more susceptible to predation. However, the size and condition of the antlers reflect on the male's fighting ability and genetic quality, making them an attractive signal for females. Then peacock spiders colorful displays. Peacock spiders are known for their intricate and vibrant courtship displays performed by males to attract females. These displays involve complex movements and patterns and are energetically costly. The male's ability to perform these displays effectively indicate their genetic fitness and prowess, serving as a reliable signal for female mate choice. Then elephant seal size and fighting. Male elephant seals engage in intense and often violent fights for access to breeding territories and females. These fights are physically demanding and can result in injuries or even death. The size and strength of male elephant seals, as well as their ability to dominate in these battles, serve as honest indicator of their genetic quality and reproductive success.